Do you want to make better presentations for your user interface designs to post on your Instagram? To make them look professional and attract more attention? Today I'll show you the quickest and the easiest way how exactly to add more visual value to all of your user interface projects. And without any further ado, let's get started. So I've already set up a Figma file here, and let's start by creating a single slide for our user interface presentation. All you need to do to get started is to create a frame. You can either press F on your keyboard or find this icon right here and just press it, click anywhere here on the canvas, and what you get is a small frame. The frame is what's going to contain all our designs, and later we'll be able to export everything that is contained within that frame. So maximum Instagram resolution for square presentations is 1080 by 1080. The next step is to actually position our design. So the easiest way to put our design on a canvas is to use a rectangle tool. This simply creates a shape that's going to contain our design. I create my designs in 1920 by 1080, which is 1080p, and that's exactly what I'm going to resize my rectangle to. So 1920 by 1080. All we do now is just manually resize to cover exactly the amount of area we want to, and it has enough breathing space from all the edges. Make sure that it's nicely centered. We go on the top right panel here, align horizontal center and align vertical center. So from here, all we need to do is go to fill area here on the right hand side, click on the color panel here. Instead of solid, we're gonna have to select the image. What it does, it gives us an option to upload our design there, and then just simply select it and push open. Because we predefined the size for our container, we don't need to do anything else, and our design fits in perfectly. Next stage is to give it a little bit of depth. Go to effects and add a drop shadow behind our project. So now we need to adjust the shadow and make it look good. Go into the effects settings, and the way I like to style my shadows is to bring it down on the y-axis right here, and then adjust the blur to make it nice and soft. So 60 is probably a little bit too low. Push it back up. And the big secret here to make shadows look good is actually to adjust the opacity and make it look right. Just the right amount of opacity gives you a really nice professional look. That already looks quite nice, but it would be pretty boring if we wouldn't give it a background. And the quickest and the easiest way to do that is by creating a blurred out background of our design. And all we have to do is select our design here in the frame 1, go to the left side layers panel. If it's something else, just make sure you click layers here and you'll see all the layers of your document. Hold Alt and start dragging underneath. All that does is creates the copy of our design here. Now it appears at the back, and all we do now is stretch it out to fill the whole frame. Something like that. It doesn't really look good at this moment, but what we can do to improve that is to give it a different effect. Instead of drop shadow that we used before to make the depth, we use the layer blur effect. What that does is softens out the whole image and make it look a bit more abstract. Now it's down to your personal preference how much blur you want there. For this particular design, I'll put it somewhere around 58. That looks nice and smooth at the back there. To create more contrast in our presentation, we need to separate our main design and the background, because at the moment it all sort of blends in together. To do that, we need to select the layer of the background and adjust the opacity so our design stands out in front of the background and it does not clash together. So something around 20 or 30 works pretty good. Let's call it 30 works pretty good for me. So to make it even more interesting, what we can do is go into the image again, and here we've got all the different options to adjust the image. And what I would want to do for particular one here is to adjust the saturation, to add a little bit more color to it in the back, so it looks a little bit more interesting. Now you could choose to leave it as it is, or we could take it even farther. With our background in place, now we need to make sure that our shadow is still working right. So now we've got a darker background and I can see that the shadow is not so visible now. Now we select our design block and go back to the shadow options. What we can do is adjust the opacity to make it a bit more visible. So somewhere around 29, 28 looks good to me. So when you zoom in, you still can see the shadow, you can see the background, and it all works pretty nicely together. To take this design even farther and make it look even more refined, what we can do is give it rounded edges, which is so popular with new mobile devices and tablets, and it looks super cool as well. Select your main design and go to the top right panel here, which says corner radius. Drag it out and see what feels right for you. So somewhere around 18 feels really good to me. Again, we could stop it here and it already looks amazing, or we can take it another step farther. And you can add so much more visual value by making it look like it's presented on a screen. And that's also super simple and super quick to do. Select your main design, go to stroke panel here and just add a stroke. So keep it at black for now, or you're free to choose whatever color that suits your design best. Make sure that it sits outside. We don't want our stroke to cover any part of our design, so make sure it sits on the outside. And then from here we adjust the thickness of our stroke. So somewhere around 7 feels good to me. And it creates a sort of iPad-ish bezel, and it just adds so much more aesthetic value to this design. What I like to do with designs like this is to make them a little bit more realistic. So the way to do that is to zoom in a little bit and create another rectangle on top of this that sits perfectly on top of our design. And Figma is super clever that way. So when you adjust, when you click on the edges of the shape and adjust, it gives you those little red crosses on the side, and that means that it's matching to the shape behind it. So from here we cancel the fill and add a stroke. Make sure that the stroke is white, and leaving it at 1 pixel is good for now. So make sure it's on the outside, because we want to cover only the dark part of our bezel. Now we need to be a bit more precise. So zoom into one of the corners, select our shape that we just created, and start dragging the corner radius parameter right here in the top right corner. Start increasing it and align it with just the side of our bezel there. Now we need to adjust the stroke opacity and drop it down to something around 60%. 60%, yeah, 60 looks good. Okay, so that makes it look a little bit more realistic, but we can do better. We go back in to select this stroke that we just created, Ctrl C or Command C on Mac, and Ctrl V or Command V to paste it back on the canvas. So we've got the same stroke on top of the one we created previously. Make sure we change outside to inside, and it puts it directly opposite to our white stroke that we just created. From here we change the stroke color to black and put it back up to 100%. So from here it doesn't look like much, but when you zoom out, it gives you the feeling of sort of realistic bezel going on. But maybe that white stroke is a little bit too bright to my liking. So what I would do is to visually adjust it down. So we select our stroke and change its opacity once again. So bring it down to 40% and that looks so much better. What else we can do with this is simply add some extra information. What I usually like to do is to add extra bits here, right centered like that. I create logos for all my website projects and I like to display them on the side as well, just to add extra value there. A little bit of explanation about what the project is, and of course put my Instagram account and the name in the corner. So it's a little bit harder to steal my work and take credit for what I create. And this is how we create a single slide Instagram user interface presentations. Looks cool? Awesome. So now let's create a double slide presentation to show more details to your followers. Since we've created all the elements that we'll be using for our presentation on this single slide, all we need to do is to group our screen elements together. Hold Ctrl or Command on Mac and drag. That selects all the items on top of the background. When you select all the items inside there, press Ctrl G or Command G to group all those items so they all sit together. So no matter what we do, they move and resize together. So now the simplest way to create additional frames is by simply holding Alt, clicking on the frame and dragging it out. So that essentially creates a copy of the frame. So we'll reposition it here for detailed slides. Just repeat the same step, hold Alt, drag it out and align it just to the right side of our first frame here. We can delete everything that's inside here. We can delete extra information since we don't need to show it on these slides here. Now is the tricky part. Because every frame holds all the pixels inside it and it does not allow to bleed it over to other frames, but we need 2 frames to export for our slides for Instagram. So if we simply try and drag it over, it just doesn't work. So the trick to go around it is to take all the elements out of the frame. Now all we have to do is to position all our elements on top of those frames without actually dropping them into frames. So from here you might encounter another visual problem here, that the frame 3 is abstracting our design again. That's a simple fix here. You go to Layers panel, click on the frame 3 and just drag it below our screen elements here. Now we've got everything sitting on top of the frames. So now we can easily reposition things to make them fit nicely within those 2 frames. So now to resize and fit our design properly, all we need to do is select it, go to one of the corners here, hold Alt and Shift together and start dragging it out. And just position it centered there so it takes a good amount of space in between both our canvas here. Now we're having a little bit of trouble here with our bezel element. We can simply fix it by double clicking our design and adjust the width of our bezel here. Somewhere around 13 feels good. And now just make sure that our design is nice and center inside our both frames here. And when you see Figma showing this red crosses across both frames, it says that it's vertically and horizontally centered. And to add even more value, I like to display more information for my followers about the tools I've used and center them nicely right there. And also the colors I've used and fonts. And that's how we set up our presentation. From here you can use this as a template to present all your other work and you don't need to create this again ever. So all you'll have to do is to select your main design, go to Image and just choose Other Image and it will automatically fill it out with a different design. And having this kind of template will save you so much time next time you're about to upload your design. And from here we simply need to export our frames for Instagram. All we need to do is select frame 1 and while holding Ctrl or Command key on your keyboard, select frame 2 and frame 3. When we've got all of our frames selected, go to Export tab right here on the right hand panel, press plus, and make sure you go into Export settings down here and uncheck Contents Only. That will make sure that we export everything we need for our Instagram presentation. From there, select the format you want to upload in. I usually keep it at PNG because it gives me a better quality over JPEG. Just click Export 3 layers button. It says exporting, and then it gives you a download file at the bottom of your browser. And we're done! Super simple but extremely effective way to take your user interface work presentation to another level. If you would like me to make any other tutorials, make sure to leave your suggestions down in the comments section and I'll see what I can do to make it happen for you. If this tutorial was helpful for you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more. And I'll see you in the next one.